Welcome to UpYourStack podcast. I'm Noah Berk, the host of the show. I'm also the co-founder of OBO, an elite HubSpot solutions partner. Every week on our podcast, we feature some of our favorite HubSpot app partners who've either built their apps on HubSpot or integrated with HubSpot to help you get the most out of your HubSpot tech stack. And today, I'm really excited to have our guest today, Richard from Fathom. Richard, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. And I love what you guys are doing. I feel like you guys are all over the place now with Fathom, but I don't want to steal your thunder. So maybe if you can explain a little bit about what Fathom does to all of our listeners today.
Sure. Yeah. Fathom is a free AI meeting assistant or note taker, if you prefer that name. We join your Zoom, Google Meet, or Microsoft Team meetings, real-time record, transcribe. And really the killer part is we have an AI in the back end that'll write your notes for you. And so in about 30 seconds after the call is over, you will get full recording, the full transcript, but really you'll get these really good notes. And what's kind of cool about those notes is we've got a bunch of different formats you can get them in for different types of calls, whether you're in sales or customer success, or maybe you're in product. But also the notes are all kind of like annotated. So you can go to any part of the note, you can click on it, and it'll take you back to that part of the meeting to watch that part of the meeting. You can then pull out clips from that meeting. Maybe I said something smart or the customer said something interesting. I can grab that clip, drop in Slack, send it to my team. So it makes it really easy for folks to kind of collaborate around meetings that they weren't in and make meetings actually like a useful artifact. So we don't have to create as many, we're not passing around these notes and wondering what happened. It's like we just pass around links back to what customers said directly.
I mean, it's such a great way to go back and actually see what was said. I mean, especially as for sales teams or consulting teams that just have so many different conversations in their head to be able to quickly go back and see what they say. I mean, these type of tools are awesome. So tell me this, like why start this? Like, why start this company? Why start this app? I figure there's other ones out there, but tell me your story.
Yeah, we started this company about 4 years ago. So a little ahead of the current kind of AI craze. And I was actually working in my last company and I was actually kind of doing a bunch of user research for a different product. And it was in that I was just on a bunch of Zoom meetings every day, like I think 15 to 20 a day for like 6 weeks. And I was like, wow, this, probably working on, I think we're getting some good reaction to it. But what really is a bee in my bonnet here is like trying to talk to someone and take notes at the same time. And then I have to clean up my notes within like 5 minutes of the call ending. Cause the notes I take on the call don't make any sense. They're all just like mnemonics, like, words, right?
Yes. You're just going through and you're typing as fast as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And this is what I've done for years. And then you got to summarize it. And if you don't summarize it right away, you forgot.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think I'm pretty good at that process, right? I've been doing it for a lot of years, like you probably have. And even I'm pretty good. Like 2 weeks later, I'd look back at these notes and be like, I don't remember which of these 15 calls that was, right? And then more importantly, I did all these calls in service of like bringing some insights back to my team. And I'd come back to my team. Hey guys, I had, talked to 50 people and here's the top 5 bullet points. And people just kind of shrug their shoulders and were like, oh, okay. Like so much got lost in that game of telephone. And I had some experience in past. My background is actually engineering and product design, but there was a period in my last company where I, stepped in and ran the sales team. We were between leadership. And so I've been on the other end of like people's notes and being like, okay, that doesn't work either, right? Trying to get sales teams write good notes about what's happening. Really, really hard. Yeah. Getting to put their data in the CRM. Everyone knows how hard that is, that sort of thing. So
pulling teeth.
Yeah. We kind of just looked at this and like there were, back then there were a few providers out there like Gong or Chorus, but really only targeted sales teams, really high price points. And I thought kind of like mediocre product experience, like the AI wasn't very good. It took you like an hour to get the recording after the meeting ended, all sorts of things, right? And
I'm shaking my head because I know these stories very well.
Yeah. And so I interviewed a bunch of Gong users and kind of came away with this like, oh, I think there's something here. I think this is also bigger than sales. I think everyone on meetings is going to want this. And so what if we go make the product that's great for sales, but also just great for everyone that's on meetings? And we think AI is going to get really good in the next couple of years. We think transcription cost is going to get really cheap. And that's going to allow us to be the first people to really give a free version of this away that's really robust. And obviously, if we give it away for free, then it can spread virally. We don't have to have a big sales team to go sell it. And like, it's a very unique, compelling kind of competitor to those more traditional solutions like Gong and Clary and Chorus.
It's really interesting that you came from the consulting background. When we first got into call recording and we started using it ourselves, the different software out there, some of what you've mentioned, we started using it for our consultants because especially for transferring knowledge between projects and what was going on. It wasn't for our sales team. it was that our consultants were on these calls and I had to go back and they were doing these workshops and had to figure out all the information. And it was really a mechanism to save time. And then in addition, what it ended up being for us was a library of awesome content that we can help other consultants get up to speed more quickly. And so it's fascinating you came from that background because a lot of your competitors come from the background for sales teams was their primary audience.
Yeah. It's funny. My background was from kind of consulting and product. And it was, I was like, well, this would solve my problems too, as well as the sales team problem sort of thing. And so that's where we had this insight that like, oh, this is something everyone can use sort of thing. And I think that's been very true. I'm constantly surprised by the breadth of job titles and stuff that we see in our user base when I hear from folks.
So you have pretty large competitors in the marketplace right now. I've been doing it for quite some time. How does Fathom differentiate itself from those competitors? Yeah,
I mean, I think a big part of it is the business model, right? Like we give away what I think is a better product for a lot less, in a lot of cases free, right? And we have some paid versions too. But, I think relative like the Gong and Choruses of the world, a lot of them were really just focused on selling to the manager and providing value to the manager. We actually were like, how do we provide value to the reps as well? And part of that's why we were like, we need to give you the notes within 30 seconds of the call ending. Because that was the thing we saw. Like, I got to do my data entry when the call ends. I'm not going to wait 30 minutes to an hour with Gong to input it into HubSpot, right? And then we kind of looked at like, oh, let's build a really killer HubSpot integration, put it in the marketplace so that just all that stuff just happens automatically. You don't have to worry about kind of the data entry part of it. But yeah, I think it's a classic story of like, disruptive business model, giving something that was previously very expensive away for free and making sure that that thing is not just free, but like free and really high quality, right? I actually think that if you go look at the AI that we have and the notes we can produce out of meetings, I will generally put them in a bake off against any of our competitors. And, I pay someone $50. They found one that they didn't think was where we weren't the winner sort of thing. So we have a team that does nothing but experiment on AI all day to make sure that it's as good as it can be with the state of the art.
That's a really cool competition. Maybe one day that's a future video competition, a little bake-off with all the competitors out there. Have a neutral party who runs it, and the winner will get $50. So you mentioned it has an integration with HubSpot. Talk to me more about that. How does that work? What's the difference between that and some of the other players in the market?
Yeah, I mean, I think is actually one of the first, maybe the first integration we built outside of the core platforms like Zoom and stuff like that. We use HubSpot ourselves. I used to be in the Salesforce universe. I'm now like living in the light, if you will. And so in some ways we built it for ourselves first, and then turns out everyone has this need, right? And so in the same way that I want kind of those annotated meeting notes right after the meeting, I also want them logged in all the right places in HubSpot. So when I'm looking back at a contact, a deal, a company, there is that record where I can see the meeting happen, but not just the meeting happened, but and click in and see like what happened in that meeting. What were the highlights? What were the important moments? And as a manager, I can also click into any of those moments and watch them myself. And so that's, we take what we really do in AI and we just put it in the right spots in HubSpot. And I think it benefits from some of our core stuff where it happens, like I said, almost instantaneously after the call ends. And so I think that's a big differentiator. The other big differentiator is like, we'll actually give you that integration on our free plan. Like you can actually use it
okay, awesome.
We'll give, I think, we have a limit. It's like the first 3 people out in order get it for free, and then you got to be on our team plan. But, we don't put it behind a paywall. We want you to see how good it is and how good your life can be when you don't have to do all this, data entry after every meeting.
And I'm assuming most people start with a free plan. So they're going to come in, just try it, test it out, and then start upgrading from there.
Correct.
And are most of these people who are moving or getting Fathom, have they currently tried one of the other platforms in the market, or are they net new to the whole idea of call recording and these meeting recordings?
It's a great question. We think most folks are net new. Our favorite thing to hear in the sales process when we go like a sales assist process is, I've used blank before, right? When people have used a tool before, it actually greases the wheels quite a bit. But I think, because the only tools for this historically were for sales teams, and not just for sales teams, but sales teams that can afford to pay $150 per person per month.
Minimum 10 licenses.
Right. Minimum 10 licenses, platform fees, all this sort of stuff.
Annual payments.
99.5 or more % of the world has never used one of these things before. So in a lot of these cases, we are the first time you're using something like this. And that's why it's important for it to be free, because you don't know what it's worth until you start using it, right? And so we want to make sure you get this really great, robust free experience that you can use forever. And then if you really love it, there's some bells and whistles you might want to opt in to buy.
Now, as we discussed earlier, you started mostly because for your purpose of the consulting. What's a mix of use cases? Is it mostly sales, consulting? Are there other use cases you're seeing in the market right now?
It's really broad, but it still has, as you'd expect, a concentration in sales and CS, right? Those folks are in meetings all day, every day, especially with customers, right? That's kind of where I think, we think Fathom is great for internal meetings too, but it's obviously most valuable when you're having a customer meeting that, is kind of a non-renewable resource. I don't have an infinite amount of time I can get from my customers, my prospects. And so it's really important that when I'm in that 30 minutes, I maximize it, which means I'm not using brain space to take notes. And also everyone in my org wants to know how it went. So, I want to make sure it gets documented. So really broad. I mean, we're HIPAA compliant now. So we see everything from therapists and coaches to consultants to product to marketing to engineering teams using internally. But there's probably the biggest concentration is going to be in those sales and CS teams.
And generally, who at these companies are the ones who are saying, hey, listen, I need this? Is this a sales leader? Is this maybe an individual sales rep? Is this a operations person? Who's the one making contact with you and saying, I need Fathom today?
I think when we got started, it was almost always reps. It was individuals because you could just, again, sign up for free and connect to HubSpot for free and that sort of thing. And so it was a really nice motion where you got a couple of reps on the team saying, hey, I've been using this thing. This thing is great, right? We should roll this out to other folks. And then, from a manager perspective, I feel like now one of the things you always worry about as a manager is am I buying a new tool? Is my team actually going to use it? Are they going to like using it?
Yes.
Sort of thing. And so when it's there's a couple people on the team already using it. Oh, and there's also, it solves a problem that I have that's different from the problem my reps have, right? The sales manager problem is different from the rep. The rep is, let me have a conversation, not have to think about taking notes. The manager is, I'm terrified every day. There's something being said on these meetings that I should be aware of. I don't have the time to listen to every single thing. So how can I have peace of mind that I can access any moment I need to understand what's happening with my customers? How do I train people more effectively? That sort of thing. So there's just a nice progression where we often start with, some individuals, could even be a founder, but eventually work our way up to someone who's in management who's how do I bring the productivity benefit of this to my team? But how do I also get a little bit of visibility into what's happening and peace of mind?
Now, one thing I do want to touch on, I'm going to touch more on this particular podcast with you, but the future of AI in your application, in Fathom, kind of walk me through the roadmap, what you expect to happen in the future and where things are headed.
Yeah. I mean, I think this has been the funnest part about this journey. We had this hypothesis that AI eventually get really good and we'd almost we're going to go build all the other hard stuff, the app, the distribution, the video recording infrastructure. And then when AI shows up, we get to just drop a new engine in the car sort of thing. It's easy to be directionally correct about these things, but we got the timing. We got pretty lucky on the timing, right? We dropped in our first GPT-4 level features last fall and we saw an immediate, kind of increase in all of our metrics because now the notes are they're now better than I think what I could write. Right. And so it's pretty exciting that we kind of get to surf on this wave. We get to just kind of, there's all these folks working on foundational models and we get to kind of just reap the benefits and apply them in all these various use cases. What I'm really excited about for this year is a lot of the AI today has been really focused on what happens in an individual meeting, writing the notes for the individual meeting. AI is now getting to the point where I think you can actually do a really good AI that looks across multiple meetings that could scorecard all of your sales team's calls effectively and accurately. That could alert you, could send you a 5-minute highlight reel every day of here's the important moments you need to know about. That could learn from which things you watch and don't watch. And so we're getting to this point where, it can also just be this kind of second brain that you have as a sales leader or CS leader or consulting team.
So basically what you're saying is, let's say one of my sales team members are on, let's call it 10 different calls with a client, maybe intros, discoveries, presentations. What you're saying in the future, perhaps even in the near future, is going to be able to go through all those calls combined and be able to say, hey, here's the highlights, here's the sentiment, here's what the client is thinking, here's what's been said, here's what still is missing that we don't know yet. In one quick summary versus me having to either read all the summaries or B, watch all those videos.
Yep, 100%. And I think what's pretty cool is if you have standardized around a certain sales methodology, right? We could then start basically telling you, hey, you've checked all your 3 meetings in, you've checked all the boxes, or your 3
Like
meetings.
Medic, for example.
Medic or Spice or any of these things we can start, and we already do this on an individual meeting basis, but really what you want is on a deal level basis, right? It has this, have we checked all the boxes? Have we done all the things? We're also doing some cool things where we can, here's all the key people in the deal. Here's what their roles are. Here's what they've, like concerns they've expressed, right? Like the amount of intelligence we can bring to you automatically is, and this stuff we're already in beta with, is really kind of stunning. I think last year was like the proof of concept. This year is I think the year where people start having their minds blown about, oh my gosh, this thing can do so much.
My mind's been blown a lot already.
That's fair.
That's fair. So I'm like, okay, what I think at the top of the call before we even had hopped on, we were talking about the Bruce Willis movie where you're like, you have avatars out there in real life. Like, is this where we're headed? Right. You and I, who knows? Are we even real on this call right now? I don't know. It could be. So that's pretty exciting. So in terms of being a force multiplier, you're seeing the ability for leadership to have a much more insightful view into what's going on in these sales engagements or sales process without actually having to be there.
Right. We can give you a lot of this kind of intelligence today, but it's all, you got to know what you're looking for ahead of time and set up alerts and automations, whatnot. We'll get to this place where it can just answer any questions retroactively, but also proactively start telling you things. Hey, you should be aware of this. And I think that's kind of, that's going to be some Minority Report level kind of stuff, right? Where it's like, this thing's going to close.
The future is happening now.
Right. Yeah. So it'll be fun.
Well, what also is I find really interesting about your story is I feel like a lot of people would have taken the approach of we have to build our own AI to be able to do this work. And you said, no, let's build the infrastructure around it. When AI gets good, we're going to plug and play that AI into that infrastructure. Were you ever thinking about building your own AI models in the sense of like from scratch, or was this always in the back of your mind? Someone's going to come out with something.
Yeah, this was always our bet.
Yeah.
And it was a reasonably informed bet based upon like folks I knew that were working in AI. And I was like, cool. The foundational model thing is a, it's like building out your own data center sort of thing. Like you could go do that, but it doesn't make any sense to do that in the 2020s. Right. And so we saw a lot of competitors that had machine learning teams and linguistic folks on staff and whatnot. And all of those investments were made basically irrelevant in one OpenAI announcement sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, I think with any startup, you have to make these sort of bets, right? And you're often wrong about them, right? Or you're wrong about them in the timing, right? Like it could have been, maybe the AI takes 3 years. In another universe, it takes 3 years longer than it did here. And then our timing's off and doesn't make sense. But no, that was always our bet from the beginning that like foundational models are coming and they're going to be bigger in scope and you're better off actually. In some ways, I wonder how much, obviously OpenAI, Anthropic, good business today, but they certainly feel like a commodity and feels like a race to the bottom there on price and value. So like interesting question for those companies. So like so competitive and what's the defensibility there? But it's a fun time to be surfing on top of what they're building because what they're building is incredible.
Well, I think you said something very interesting. You made a bet. You weren't indecisive. You were decisive. You said, this is what we believe is going to happen and we're going to go ahead and build it this particular way. I think oftentimes entrepreneurs can be indecisive, timid about making a bet. Maybe they're making the wrong one this way or that way and they fluctuate between the two. But not only did you make the bet, but it sounds like you stuck to it. Even though those models weren't necessarily there at that moment in time, you said, I believe it's going to be there in the future. And it was.
We had a couple of bets like that. We had one that was like, we think transcription cost is going to zero. And if it doesn't go to zero, all bets are off, right? Like that one had to pay off too, right? It's like a parlay if you're a gambler, right? We had to have 3 bets kind of hit at the same time, right? One bet is like, we think this is relevant to everyone, not just sales. We think transcription costs going to zero and we think AI is going to get really big, really useful. And we don't need to build that in-house. You need a 3-way parlay that and that needs to hit. I think I talk about this a lot with other founders. We went through Y Combinator for this. And so I got to meet tons of great founders. And I think one of the biggest differences I see between folks that I think did really well and folks that struggled was what I call like hypothesis driven startups, right? Like some folks just seem like they're reacting to the most recent kind of stimulus or warning. Yeah. And other folks have like, oh no, we have like a set of bedrock hypotheses around how the world is going to be. And that allows us to orient, like it allows you to like focus your business and, you make these bets and without it, you spend a lot of time and energy kind of relitigating these questions over and over. Right.
Yeah. That is incredibly insightful. And I think great advice for anyone listening, especially who are thinking about building their own apps, whether on HubSpot or integrating with it or something else. And you are a success story around that approach, the way that you thought of it. So when it comes to, we talked a little bit about AI in the future. What else is coming out with your product? What else are you working on now that's going to kind of take things to the next level here?
I mean, yeah, a lot of our focus this year is, honestly, it's continue to add more and more AI surfaces into the product, with the free product, individual product, and our team products. I already mentioned some stuff we're doing on teams. Pretty excited about some of the scorecarding pieces, the kind of almost like Chat GPT for all your meetings type experiences. I'm also just overall excited about building out, improving our integrations. We've got some big plans to improve our HubSpot integration, our marketplace app, and, just making the product much more extensible, allowing you to actually get in and kind of give the feedback to the AI. We're actually beta testing something now where we'll write these meeting summaries for you. And like I said, I think they're better than anything we've seen from our competitors, but we think the best meeting summary are the ones really, really personal to you. And so we're coming with all these ways where you can give it feedback and say, oh, I want some more detailed, or this is great, but you add a section about this. And we'll give you kind of a starting point, awesome. But you can from that I use MedPick, but I don't use the P. And we ask this question and whatnot. Right. So I think that's really, really going to be really, really cool. And there's a lot of folks that are making, I'm trying to make the best Sandler sales template out there. I'm making the best, and get to a place where people can kind of share that content and make it kind of, I think some of the best products have these really deep levels of extensibility where you can get in and monkey with it a little bit, which creates these kind of communities of folks, sharing notes about how they monkey with it, which I think is pretty powerful.
That is. One thing that you had said earlier when you were making the bet on the AI, and you mentioned that other companies and organizations in your space had invested a lot of money in machine learning and consultants and data scientists, whomever they may be. Do you suppose that's one? And people are sometimes skeptical when a product is less expensive than other products in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. Was it because all those other organizations had to charge so much more money because they had invested all this money in this other technology and all this overhead, whereas you're like, no, my bet's on someone else is going to create this in a commodity and we'll plug it in? Is that why you can deliver this service at such a more affordable rate than other competitors?
That's part of it. Part of it is that transcription story where when we got started, transcription costs you $3 an hour. And so if the average user is doing 10 hours a month, which is pretty reasonable, that means your hard costs on transcription alone are $30 a month. So you ended up with this generation. If you started your product in 2015 to 2020 even, if you built out your pricing model based upon that, you're like, well, costs us $30 a month, probably it costs us $40, $50. We want to make at least a 2/3 margin. Got to charge $150. And that's kind of where that comes from. We not only kind of bet on the transcription stuff, but we built out all of our own services. We don't use almost any third-party services outside of, we use cloud, but we don't use a bunch of third-party providers that actually end up being pretty expensive. So we have our own meeting bots. We have our own video streaming servers, that sort of stuff. And I saw this, I'm good friends with the founders of Twitch. I actually worked with them on their company before Twitch. And I saw this is how they won the market, right? They built a different company called Justin TV. But what Justin TV allowed them to do is they had basically all their own video streaming infrastructure. And so they could stream for cheaper than their competitors, which allowed them to always just have this inbuilt advantage. And so that's part of the story as well. But I think it's just the classic story of incumbents built a pricing model priced at X, market shifted, and now you can actually sell it for X, a quarter of X, but it's really hard for companies to get back revenue. Right?
Yes,
how do you once you
generally say go up and to the right, not down and to the left?
It's really hard, especially if you're on that VC escalator and you're expected to hit your next milestone. Where are you going to fit in? Oh, we're seeing people compete with our space. We're going to drop our price 70%. That just doesn't work. And so I think you're going to see a lot of this over the next couple of years where anywhere there's a market where there's, a top down sales assist, high price point product. I think there's often, unless it's very niche, there's an opportunity for someone to make the PLG bottom up, premium version of that and be really successful, because who would, in a heads up knife fight between sales led high price point and PLG low price point, PLG always wins, right? Outside of some enterprise domains and whatnot, PLG always wins because people would always rather get their hands on the product and experience it before they put up dollars, right? That's It's classic, like give, get, right? From your sales trading, right? So I just think that that's a winning move into itself.
Richard, I was going to ask you what advice you have for people who are building their apps on HubSpot, but I think you may have just given the best advice yet to think in that manner. That's an excellent viewpoint. So I'm going to skip that question because I think you answered it perfectly. One thing I do like to ask is you guys are using HubSpot. Mm-hmm. What are your favorite apps on HubSpot right now?
I mean, obviously our own, but outside of that, I'll give a couple ones that probably people are pretty familiar with, and then maybe some they're not. One, we love Zapier. Like we build a lot of stuff with Zapier. Build a lot of stuff with HubSpot automations as well. We use both. We love them all. I also really love Census. It's a reverse ETL tool. It's how we get a lot of data from our data warehouse about what's happening with our users. I mean, we have so many data points in HubSpot that allow us to drive all those automations we build in HubSpot. And all of that's powered by us pushing content from our data warehouse via Census. And then my last one we most recently started using, but I really, really love because I really love the mission of this company, is Common Paper. Okay. Common Paper is kind of like a open source legal docs in a lot of ways. So they've got like a standardized NDA, a standardized customer, like basically terms of service, a standardized DPA, anything, when you're signing contracts, everyone builds their own contracts.
Yeah.
I was like, why do we do that? Why isn't it just like, one of the things that happened in startup 10, 15 years ago is Y Combinator kind of standardized thing called the SAFE, which has become the standard way you raise money. And it made everything so easy because you don't have to negotiate terms. Everyone's, of course, we're using a SAFE. It's like kind of adjudicated in the market to be like pretty neutral. It's not biased towards founders. It's not biased towards investors. The same thing does not exist for company contracts, even though we're selling SaaS, almost all the contracts are the same, right? And so they have a standard set of open source terms, and then you can on top of that customize like things that are important in your business, but it becomes kind of like this like ad lib style rather than paying a legal team. And they just built a HubSpot integration. So now kind of like a DocuSign, all of the stuff that we case all of our customer contracts that go through Common Paper end up on the right records in HubSpot. And obviously that's awesome.
That is awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I always love to ask this question. What's the most embarrassing customer experience you've had so far?
Oh gosh. Most embarrassing customer experience. I mean, we had some AI hallucinations early on. I think that's probably easily the thing that like when we were first getting going, sometimes AI, especially on transcription, would, without the right safeguards in place, which we now have, it would, and this is like early GPT, not even 3.5, right? You had to put some real guardrails around that thing. And it occasionally said some things that you would be, where'd that come from? So thankfully,
I can only imagine.
We fixed all that now. But yeah, in the early days, hallucinations were, it was the frontier of AI. We didn't really know.
Yeah, sure.
Didn't realize it's going to be the case and sort of thing. And I think we're all now very familiar with hallucinations. Everyone spends a lot of time thinking about how to like detect them, tamp them down, that sort of thing. So no longer an issue, but there are some where I got customer forwarded me. Do you know your AI thought I said this on a call? And I like read that. I was like, oh gosh, no, I did not know it.
Wait, you didn't mean you said this on the call to your client, like the CEO of this major Fortune 500 company? What do you mean? Of course you said it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's awesome. That's the most embarrassing one. But
so what do you like about HubSpot these days?
HubSpot continues to impress me. Like for being such a big company now, usually by the time you get to be this big a company, the product starts to really get very candidly get kind of crappy and hard to use. It's still, it's funny. I think most of our Y Combinator class is using HubSpot last I looked, right? Like as a CRM. And it's like, usually it's like once you get to $2 billion in market cap, startups aren't using you anymore because the product isn't that good anymore. And so I'm really excited about some things that are coming on the marketplace side, AI wise, which I think they've announced, but I'm just going to pretend they haven't. But basically it's going to make it the things you'll be able to do with your marketplace apps is going to get a lot more robust in the next couple of months. And I'm really excited about that, putting more like richness and rich interfaces into our HubSpot integration so you can get more Fathom content directly inside HubSpot without even having to leave. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Oh, that's awesome. Richard, thank you so much for having you on the show today. And where can people find out more information about Fathom?
Sure. Yeah. We are fathom.video. So not .com, but fathom.video. You can go there. Again, sign up for free. You'll be up and running in a few minutes, just in time for your next call. And if you want to find me, I'm on LinkedIn, Richard White on LinkedIn. I've got like, at least for now, this like pixely avatar. Everyone thinks it's like a NFT. It's not an NFT. It's just like an 8-bit image. I don't know why we had to seed all 8-bit images to NFTs, but that's me. You can ping me on LinkedIn, and my SLA there is I'll try to get back to you within about like 3 to 5 business days. I get a little inundated there, but I always love cold outreach from folks. So feel free to ping me there.
Well, again, Richard, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Again, this is UpYourStack. Thank you for listening today. I'm your host, Noah Berk. I'm one of the co-founders of OBO and Elite HubSpot Solutions Partner. I hope you enjoy today's episode and look forward to having you here again. Thanks.